I had spent 4 hours hand-painting gold along the sugar roses. That was the part I kept thinking about when security dragged me through the hotel's service corridor like I weighed nothing at all. Not the shame, not the stare from the prep cooks who stopped pretending not to watch, not even the fact that one of the men had my invoice clenched in his fist while telling me I wasn't on the list. The roses, gold leaf clung to my thumb. It flashed once under the fluorescent lights, then disappeared when my shoulder hit the steel push bar and the November rain slapped me full in the face. Wait, I twisted hard enough to make one of them swear. My tray! The taller guard shoved the box after me. It hit the sidewalk crooked. The lid burst open. 3 tiers of pistachio cream and spun sugar collapsed into a shining green wound. People always talk about heartbreak like it announces itself in some grand language. Sometimes it sounded like cream sliding onto wet concrete. "You can't do this," I said, breathless more from fury than pain. "The Bellini order was confirmed yesterday. You don't have authorization tonight. I made the authorization." I spoke to, the shorter one stepped close enough for me to smell mint and cheap aftershave. "Listen carefully, get your things and go." I should have. I should have gathered my knives, my bent offset spatula, the ruined sugar flowers, and the little blue pouch I kept clipped inside my bag. I should have taken the humiliation home and cried, where nobody could hear me. Instead, I looked through the half-open service door and saw one of the banquet boys wheeling in a replacement tray. White porcelain, silver cover, pistachio piping too flat, cream too glossy. Wrong. Even through rain, diesel, and city cold, I caught it, the faint medicinal sweetness under the nuts. Bitter almond. My heartbeat turned ugly. "Stop!" I lunged toward the door. The taller guard caught my arm so fast my teeth clicked. "What part of leave? That tray is wrong." I tried to wrench free. "Somebody changed the filling. You're done here. Someone inside will get hurt if you serve that." The words came out sharp enough to cut me too. I wasn't begging to be let back in. I wasn't even thinking about the money. Old reflex made the choice before pride could. If I smelled something bad in food, I moved toward it. That was all. The guard shoved me again. I slipped on the wet curb and would have gone down hard if a black car hadn't rolled soundlessly to the hotel entrance at that exact moment. Every man near the door changed. It happened in silence first, spines straightening, hands dropping away from jackets. Even the rain seemed to strike the pavement more carefully. Then I heard it. Click, metal, clean, deliberate. A lighter opening. The man who stepped out of the back seat did not look at me first. He looked at the guard holding my arm. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark coat, no umbrella, hair damp at the temples, face so composed it made my own feel embarrassing. He had one gloved hand in his pocket and the silver lighter loose in the other. Not lit. Just open. The guard released me at once. "Mr. Salvator," he said. The man's gaze shifted. It landed on my split lip, the cream on my apron, the cake bleeding into the street. Then my face. "Adriana Bellini," he said. Not a question. Rain crawled down the back of my neck. "How do you know my name?" His eyes were very dark, not empty, worse than empty, precise. Beside him, another man with a crooked nose murmured, "Boss, we're late." He ignored him. I stared because I didn't know what else to do. I had never seen Dante Salvator in person, but you lived in Chicago long enough. You learned what names people said too softly. Salvator owned hotels, trucking companies, restaurants. Half the men city council claimed not to know, and if every whispered story was true, the right to decide whether someone still had tomorrow. The taller guard cleared his throat. "She wasn't on the list. Then the list changed." Dante's voice was quiet. "She did not." No one answered. He looked at the ruined cake, then at me again. "Why are you trying to go back inside? There are moments when your body answers before your fear gets to vote." "The pistachio cream isn't mine," I said. "It smells like bitter almond." One of the guards actually laughed. Dante didn't. "You can smell that from here." "Yes." "You're certain?" I thought of the old woman from the bridal party who had come down to the kitchen earlier, smiling at my sugar roses with 2 folded hands, and telling me her late husband had brought her pistachios from Sicily when they were young. I thought of waiters plating slices under gold chandeliers, while music swelled and nobody knew what sat under the frosting. Yes, I said. And if I'm wrong, you lose 5 minutes. If I'm right, somebody dies. His gaze sharpened. Not because I'd challenged him, because I hadn't. I'd said it like fact. Then, without taking his eyes off me, he held out the lighter. Open, waiting. I didn't understand. Hold this, he said. I took it because he'd told me to, and because refusing felt somehow more intimate. It was heavier than it looked, warm from his hand. He turned to the guard nearest the door. Lock the ballroom service. No one eats until Mateo clears the kitchen. The guard froze. Sir, the mayor's table is all ready. Dante looked at him. That was it, that was all. The man ran. The crooked-nosed one exhaled through his teeth. Gianni is going to miss the shrimp. Dante still faced me. Can you identify the tray? Yes. Then you're coming with me. I'm not going anywhere with. His gaze dropped to the cream on the sidewalk, then to my shoes soaking through in the gutter. Something in his mouth changed. Not softer. Never that, just decided. Easy, stray. The word should have offended me. Instead it hit low and strange. He took the lighter back from my hand without brushing my fingers and guided me toward the hotel with one palm hovering at my back, not touching. Somehow more controlling than if he had gripped me hard. Inside, everything smelled of orchids and money. By the time I pointed out the switched tray, and one of Dante's men cut open the piping bag to reveal crushed cyanide ampules sealed in the cream, my knees had started shaking. Not dramatically. Small enough that I hoped nobody would see, but Dante saw too much. He leaned close enough that I caught the layered scent of him, cold air, cedar, and something darker that felt like night had followed him indoors. Where do you live? He asked. I told him before I thought better of it. He looked past me to a man in a gray suit. The man touched an earpiece, listened, then went still. Boss, he said carefully, her place has already been hit. All the air in me fell straight through. My apartment? Dante's face did not change. No, he said. Your old life, and I didn't go home that night. If you had asked me when I was 19 what kind of place a dangerous man lived in, I would have said marble, gold, maybe a tiger skin rug if the universe was in a tacky mood. Dante Salvator lived in restraint. The house sat behind iron gates on the lake, all limestone and dark windows and old money that didn't need to shout. The marble was there, yes, but muted. The art looked inherited instead of purchased. The quiet was the expensive part, not peace, control. Bianca Costa met us at the door in navy scrubs and earrings shaped like tiny knives. She took one look at my ruined apron and Dante's coat over my shoulders and said, "Oh, good, another problem." Dante handed her my bag. Guest room 3, she's bleeding. Then patch her, her eyes cut to him. I was going to, Dante, that's what the word bleeding usually suggests. He left without answering. I stood in the foyer, wet and humiliated and suddenly furious enough to hold myself upright. Bianca was around 40, beautiful in a way that had no interest in being noticed. She led me upstairs, cleaned my lip, pressed arnica into the bruise darkening my forearm, and gave me a long t-shirt that smelled like lavender and starch. You can sleep, she said. I'm not sleeping. Fine, then stare at the wall artistically, but do it after tea. I'm not staying. She paused at the doorway. That would matter more if the gate opened from your side. I looked past her. No lock inside the room. Of course. The anger that rose in me felt almost clean. Am I a guest or a hostage? Bianca considered. Tonight, a witness with expensive linens. Then she left me alone with my thoughts, which was worse than handcuffs. I called my phone 6 times before remembering it had been in my bag, and my bag had been searched downstairs by men who said very little and apologized not at all. By the time they returned it, the battery was dead. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about my apartment, the sugar bins, my father's recipe books. The photograph of my mother at 21 in front of St. Cecilia's with her hair full of wind. All of it touched by strangers because I had smelled something in a cake and not minded my business. A soft knock sounded once, then the door opened. The man from the car came in carrying a silver tray with tea and 2 slices of prosciutto wrapped around something green. He grinned at me. Emergency hospitality. Do not tell Bianca I brought cured meat into a medical environment. He was broad-shouldered, around my age or a little older, with tired, kind eyes and a nose that had lost an argument years ago. I don't know who Bianca is to you, I said, but she frightens me enough to consider betrayal. He set the tray down. Smart girl, Gianni Rizzo. Adriana. I know. You've had an eventful evening. That's one word for kidnapping, he winced. We're calling it protective overreaction. I drive the overreaction. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Gianni pointed at the prosciutto. If she asks, that is cucumber. It is visibly not cucumber. I'm grieving the loss of bread, Adriana. Let me have my lies. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Small, wrongly timed, human, Gianni's expression gentled. There she is, he said. Who? The girl who ran back into a hotel full of armed idiots because she thought somebody might eat bad cream. I looked down at the tea so he wouldn't see whatever moved in my face. He sat in the armchair like we were cousins at a funeral and not strangers in a mafia house. Bianca says your lip will swell by morning. Bianca says many things. She says even more to me. Last week she told me if I brought mortadella into her kitchen again, she would let me die beautifully and with seasoning. I laughed again. It felt like stealing. Then the door opened and the temperature of the room changed. Dante didn't look tired. Men like him probably outsourced that too. He had removed his coat. His shirt was black. His sleeves were folded once, precisely, revealing strong forearms and a pale old scar near the wrist. Gianni stood. Boss! Dante's gaze flicked to the tray. Prosciutto. It identifies as cucumber. Get out. Gianni sighed as if martyrdom was his true calling. One day Bianca will value me. Not if you smell like fennel. I smell like resilience. He left with the plate tucked behind his back. Dante stayed where he was, not crowding the room. Just occupying it until the walls remembered who paid for them. My men secured your apartment building, he said. You will not return there tonight. My landlord called. He will. You mean after someone tells him what to say? His eyes rested on me for one beat too long. Yes, I stood because sitting made me feel young. You don't get to decide where I sleep. I already did. My life is not one of your hotels. No, his voice stayed level. If it were, security would have done their job. I should have hated how calm he was. I mostly did. But beneath the anger something else had started happening, something I wanted no part of. I kept noticing details. The way he never wasted a movement. The way his hands stayed still unless they meant something. The way silence gathered around him like trained muscle. Why do you know my name? I asked. He looked at me, not away, not down. Because I make it my business to know who walks into my rooms. That's not an answer. It is the one you're getting tonight. I folded my arms. So what now? I wait here while you decide whether I'm useful. His gaze dropped to the bruise on my forearm. Something like anger moved behind his composure. Not at me. At the shape of fingers already darkening my skin. You wait here, he said, while I decide who used you. I swallowed. Used, there it was. The thing I hadn't let myself name. He turned to go. Stopped with his hand on the doorframe. Didn't face me when he spoke. No one enters this room without Bianca or me. That's supposed to reassure me. It wasn't for reassurance. Then he left, and the door stayed open exactly 1 inch. By midnight, my boss from Bellini Patisserie had left 3 voicemails, each more frightened than the last. By 1, the wedding planner had sent a message saying the family would be pursuing damages unless I signed a non-disclosure statement by morning. By 2, I understood something I had not wanted to. Nothing in my life had broken by accident, and outside the tall dark window, the gate stayed closed. I woke before dawn because unfamiliar silence made my body suspicious. In my own apartment, morning arrived through pipes knocking, buses hissing, the bakery downstairs rolling up its metal gate. Here, the quiet had layers, distant footsteps. The low mechanical hum of hidden heat, like wind brushing the glass, and somewhere below, a soft metallic click, I knew it before I opened my eyes. His lighter. The sound landed in me strangely. Like warning, like proof. I went downstairs in borrowed clothes and found Bianca already in the kitchen, tying back her hair while reading something on a tablet. The kitchen was bigger than my first apartment and twice as organized. Copper pans glowed above the island. The espresso machine looked capable of judging character. Bianca glanced up. "If you're going to stare at my pantry, at least make yourself useful. I could make breakfast." She raised one brow. "For how many armed men? How many do you keep? Enough to eat all my oranges and deny it. I should have been too angry to function." Instead, my hands reached for work because that was how they had always translated fear into something livable. Flour, eggs, butter soft enough to take a thumbprint. I found blood oranges in the cold room and pistachios in sealed glass jars, and before I fully decided to, I was making pastry. Bianca watched me zest citrus over sugar. "You do that when you're upset." "Do what?" "Move like if you stop, you'll hear yourself too clearly." I kept stirring. I didn't ask for analysis with my apron. "No, but you're getting both." By 8, the kitchen smelled of browned butter and orange oil. I made sfogliatelle shells thin enough to crack like paper, and filled them with ricotta, scented with burnt honey and blood orange. For the center, I spun sugar into a narrow cage around bitter dark chocolate mousse, fragile on top, guarded in the middle, sharp beneath. Bianca leaned in. "That looks heartbreakingly impractical. It's supposed to—" "For whom?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "Whoever eats it." She made a quiet sound that might have been approval. I plated 6. Not because I planned to feed Dante Salvator, because cooking for one in a kitchen that size felt obscene. At 9:30, the room changed without warning. Nobody announced him. They never had to. Italian rolled through the doorway first, low male voices, then silence. Not fear exactly. Deference sharpened into stillness. Dante stepped in with Matteo Caruso on one side and Gianni on the other. Matteo was all edges. Blonde black hair cropped close, jaw set like he resented architecture. He gave me the kind of look security men probably gave unattended bags. Gianni gave the pastry a reverent stare. "If one of those is mine, I'll confess to crimes I haven't even committed." "Your sodium says no," Bianca said from the sink. "My sodium is a snitch." Dante's attention landed on the plates, then on me. "You cooked. It was either that or scream." Gianni nodded solemnly. "Excellent therapeutic choice." Matteo moved toward the door. "Boss, meeting in 10. Dante ignored him and stepped to the island. "What is it?" "Blood orange, pistachio, dark chocolate." He waited. I hated that I understood what he wanted. The shell looks hard, the middle is softer than it should be, the bottom bites back. Gianni put a hand over his heart. "She made my childhood edible." Bianca flicked a towel at him. Dante picked up a fork, broke the sugar cage with one precise tap. The sound rang sharp in the huge room. Something in my spine answered. He tasted, not greedily, not for pleasure, like information, then his gaze lifted to mine. "There's cardamom." "A little. It shouldn't work." "It does." He took another bite. That should not have mattered to me. It mattered in ways I didn't understand. Matteo checked his watch. "Boss." Dante set the fork down. "Cancel the noon tasting at the hotel." Matteo frowned. "That will irritate the mayor." "Irritation is survivable. Your uncle won't like it. Then Renzo can eat somewhere else." The name snagged in me. Uncle, family, of course. Men like Dante weren't born in rooms alone. He turned to leave, then stopped when he saw the book on the counter beside my elbow. My father's recipe notebook. Old leather. Burn mark on one corner from the oven in our first apartment. I had taken it from my bag sometime before dawn without thinking. Dante's face didn't change. His eyes did. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I pulled the book closer. "It was my father's." Gianni glanced from me to Dante, suddenly interested in the floor. "My father was a pastry chef," I added, because something in the room had tightened. "Not a criminal." Nobody said anything. Matteo's expression gave away nothing. Bianca dried a glass very slowly. Dante's voice was even when it came. No one said otherwise. People usually do when they hear his name. "What was his name?" I watched him. Carlo Bellini. If I had not been looking directly at Dante, I might have missed it, not shock. He was too disciplined for that, something smaller and deeper. As if an old bruise had been pressed exactly right, Gianni looked like he desperately wanted bread. Matteo said, "Boss." A sharp crack shattered the kitchen window over the sink. Bianca ducked. Glass sprayed the marble. Matteo had his gun out before I understood the noise was gunfire and not weather. Dante moved faster than thought. 1 second he was across the room. The next his hand was at the back of my neck, driving me down behind the island while another shot punched white dust from the far wall. "Stay there," he said. I wanted to say I was already there, flattened under a kitchen island in another woman's shirt, while a man I had met 12 hours ago crouched over me like a shield. Instead, I watched his face. No panic, no yelling, just violence narrowed into efficiency. He looked at Matteo. "West Ridge, 2 shooters." Matteo was already moving. Gianni, crouched embarrassingly low behind a pantry cart, muttered, "If I die on a low-carb plan, I'll haunt all of you." Bianca hissed, "If you die in my kitchen, I'll kill you." Another shot. Then silence. Dante's hand stayed at my neck 1 fraction longer than necessary. When he removed it, cold rushed into the shape he'd left. He rose, so did the room around him. "Matteo," he called. A voice crackled from somewhere beyond the hall. "1 down, 1 running." Dante looked at the broken glass, the recipe book under my hand, and then at me. Someone was already moving against us. By afternoon, I had learned 3 things about Dante Salvator's world. First, bad news traveled quietly. Second, every quiet in his house meant someone somewhere was doing something violent on his behalf. Third, once men decided you were safer inside their circle than outside it, they treated your resistance like weather. Inconvenient, not decisive. "I'm not going to your meeting," I told him. "You are, I'm not a decoration." "No," Dante adjusted his cuff without looking at me. "You're evidence." That should have made me angrier than it did. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe being told the truth in a house full of strategically edited sentences had its own appeal. The meeting was at the St. Gabriel, one of his own hotels, smaller than the ballroom disaster from the night before, more private. Built for men who discussed futures over polished wood, and denied all of their names in court if anyone ever asked. I wore a borrowed charcoal dress from Bianca's closet and my own black flats, still damp at the seams. Dante had not asked whether I minded wearing another woman's clothes into one of his buildings. He had simply arranged the car, the escort, the silence. The elevator doors slid shut with a breath of polished steel. For 3 floors, we rode alone. I kept my arms folded. "If this is about intimidation, I'm not very impressive." His gaze stayed on the changing numbers. "It isn't about intimidation. What is it about?" "Truth," I almost laughed. "That feels ambitious for today." The corner of his mouth moved, not enough to count as a smile. "You think I brought you to the theater. You bring me places without asking. It suggests a taste for staging." He looked at me then, directly enough to make the small space feel smaller. "I brought you because men lie more carefully when the person they failed is in the room." That should not have landed like something almost gentle, but it did. At 7, the elevator jolted. Not dramatically, just enough to throw me a step off balance. Dante caught my waist before I hit the mirrored wall. His hand was broad, firm, and shockingly warm through the thin fabric at my side. He did not pull me close. He just held me steady, looked once at the ceiling panel, and said, "Again." "Again what?" "The technician said this was fixed." The lights flickered. A faint electrical smell touched the air. Something changed in his face. It was so brief I might have imagined it if his hand had not tightened once at my waist. Not desire, not anger. Memory, maybe. Something old enough to live in the body before it reached the mind. The elevator shuddered to a stop. I heard myself inhale. Dante released me immediately and hit the emergency call button with controlled precision. "Open it!" The operator's voice crackled back, apologetic and thin. "Mr. Salvator, we're restarting the open it. We need 60 seconds." His jaw set. In the stillness, I heard it again, that metallic click as his thumb flipped open the silver lighter, then shut it, then open again without striking flame. Click, click, not habit, anchor. I looked at his wrist, at the old scar I had seen in the kitchen, at the way the elevator's enclosed air seemed to press against him harder than against me. "You hate locked rooms," I said quietly. His gaze cut to mine. There were 1,000 ways he could have denied me. He chose silence. The operator stammered. "Restarting now." Another beat, another click of the lighter. Then the car lurched and moved. When the doors opened, Dante stepped out first. He turned and offered a hand as if nothing at all had happened. I stared at it. He waited. I put my hand in his because pride was beginning to feel childish beside the things I kept accidentally learning about him. His fingers closed only long enough to guide me over the threshold. Then they were gone. The private dining floor smelled like truffle oil, cigar smoke, and expensive nerves. Men in suits rose when Dante entered. Not all the way. Just enough to announce that sitting had become a privilege he controlled. At the head of the long table stood an older man with silver hair swept elegantly back and a smile practiced enough to count as a weapon. "Dante," he said warmly. "You bring surprises." Uncle Renzo Salvator looked like every grandfather who had ever pinched a child's cheek at church and slipped cash into a priest's hand. That was what made him dangerous at once. His eyes settled on me with polished interest. "And who is this?" "Adriana Bellini," Dante said. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. I felt it. A name dropped into old water. Renzo's smile held. "Bellini, well." My skin went cold. Dante did not look at him. "The chef from last night." "Ah," Renzo spread his hands. "Then we owe you our gratitude." The words were correct. The tone was not. Gratitude can be warm, awkward, embarrassed. This felt measured. Curious, Matteo took position near the wall. Gianni lingered by a sideboard arranged with sparkling water, olives, and enough charcuterie to kill his cardiologist on sight. He whispered as I passed, "If I die near this prosciutto, tell Bianca I died resisting." "You'll die lying," I whispered back. He looked wounded. That too. I should not have been able to laugh there, among men whose cuff links probably cost more than my rent, but Gianni's tragedy played in a frequency designed to humanize hell. Dante seated me at his right. A mistake if he meant to calm the room. Every eye hit me, then him, then the place settings, recalculating. I understood enough to know proximity meant rank or protection or both. A hotel security director was brought in first, gray-faced, sweating despite the cold room, then the banquet manager. Then a supplier whose smile collapsed the second Dante slid a piping bag onto the table, the one with cyanide residue. Nobody raised their voice. That made everything worse. Questions were asked. Dates confirmed. Shift changes reviewed. Dante spoke rarely. When he did, people answered as if silence itself might cut them. By the time the supplier admitted, he had accepted a private correction to the order from a man using Salvator credentials. My hands had curled under the tablecloth hard enough to mark my palms. "Which credentials?" Dante asked. The supplier swallowed. "A code from old family records, ones only insiders would know." Renzo clicked his tongue. "Then someone is trading on our name." Trading. As if murder were a stock position. Dante's gaze rested on his uncle for half a beat too long. "Yes." I felt it then, that strange invisible current between them, not open conflict. Something more disciplined. A chessboard mid-game, pieces still upright, outcome already expensive. The meeting broke in layers. Men dismissed, then recalled, then sent in different directions. Matteo left to pull footage from loading bays. Gianni was dispatched to reroute 3 deliveries and mourned the untouched focaccia on his way out. When only Renzo, Dante, and I remained, the old man looked at me with almost avuncular softness. "Carlo Bellini once made cassata for my wife's birthday," he said. The room narrowed. My father's name in that mouth felt wrong. "You knew him?" I asked. "I knew many people, Cara," his smile held. "Your father was talented, shame about how things ended." Heat climbed my throat. "You mean when he died accused of theft he didn't commit?" Silence. Dante turned his head slightly, not enough to stop me. enough to be ready. Renzo sighed as if tragedy had inconvenienced his digestion. The dead often take the truth with them. I don't think mine did. The old man studied me. For the first time, the warmth in his face thinned. Careful, conviction can sound like accusation when it doesn't know the room. Dante stood. That was all, just rising to his feet. Renzo's expression sealed over at once. My guest has heard enough for one afternoon, Dante said. Guest, not witness, not problem. Something else tightened in my chest. Renzo inclined his head and took his leave with the faint scent of bergamot and old sin trailing after him. When the doors closed behind him, I let out a breath I had not noticed I was holding. You knew he'd react to my name, I said. Dante didn't deny it. You put me at this table to watch him. Yes, you could have told me. Yes. The second yes hurt more than the first. I turned away, furious in a way that felt too close to betrayal for a man who had never promised me honesty. Do not use me again without warning. His voice came low behind me. Then stop being useful in ways that get you killed. I spun back. That is not an answer to anything. No, he stepped closer, not enough to trap, enough to alter my breathing. It's the part that matters. For one impossible second, I thought he might touch my face. His gaze dropped to my mouth, to the healing split in my lip, then lifted again. Desire cracked through his composure by the width of a blade. He stopped himself, deliberately. The room felt full of all the things he did not do. Come on, Stray, he said, voice rougher now. I'm taking you home. The fact that I already knew which home he meant frightened me more than the meeting had. He gave me my apartment back in stages. Not life. That was gone too cleanly for return. But the rooms, the lock, the cracked blue bowl on the counter, the cardigan I kept forgetting on the back of a chair. Dante sent Matteo through first. Then two men I had never met swept the place for devices, weapons, and whatever else dangerous men knew how to fear. Only after that did he let me cross my own threshold. My sugar bins had been slit open. Flour whitened the floor like old snow. Cabinet doors hung open. Every recipe card in the kitchen drawer had been rifled through and left skewed, as if the person searching had no respect for the ordinary ways people stored their lives. I stood in the doorway and understood with a sudden cold clarity that this was the first place I had ever called mine. Not because it was beautiful, because I had paid for every fork. Dante stayed just behind me, not touching, not speaking. I walked to the bedroom. The mattress had been cut, closet emptied, shoes overturned. The small tin where I kept rent cash sat open and bare, though the money was still there. Whoever did this had not wanted to steal from me. They had wanted me to know I could be reached. My father's second notebook was missing. I turned too fast, nearly colliding with Dante. There were two. His attention sharpened. Two what? Recipe books. I only brought one to your house. The other was here. Yes, my mouth went dry, and now it is. Matteo, scanning the shelves near the window, looked up. Specific recipes? No. Just I stopped because suddenly it sounded absurd. His notes. He wrote everything down, ratios, supplier names, dates. Dante held out a hand. Show me the one you have. I hesitated. Then reached into my bag and gave him the leather notebook I'd carried like a relic since I was 17. He opened it carefully. His thumb paused over a page marked with vanilla stains and my father's slanted handwriting. Cannoli shells, I said. Hazelnut dacquoise, a wedding sponge. Not just recipes, he said. He turned the book toward me and pointed to the margins. Tiny notations, numbers in pairs, initials disguised as ingredients. I had grown up around these pages and never noticed that the cinnamon amounts repeated in impossible sequences, or that certain clients appeared only as fruit names. That's shorthand, Dante said. I stared. For what? His eyes lifted to mine. For movement. I wanted to say no. I wanted to insist my father had not buried Mafia codes between butter percentages and sugar temperatures. Instead, I remembered the way my father had always gone silent when certain men came into the bakery. The way he kept one drawer locked and once told me that being a decent man was not the same as being a safe one. The floor seemed to tilt slightly. Then he was involved, I said. No, the certainty in Dante's voice made me look up. He was forced into proximity, he said. That is different. How would you know? Because I suddenly understood that he did. That somewhere behind all his omissions lay the simple fact that my father had existed inside his world, long before I ever smelled poison in a cake. Before he could answer, Matteo called from the kitchen. Boss! We went back. He had found a torn page taped under the underside of my table. The tape was fresh, the page old, my father's hand. On it was a recipe for burnt sugar syrup. Only the ingredients were wrong. Flour, lemon, 2 gloves, Saint, West Gate, midnight, not ingredients, instructions. I sat down hard in one of my own kitchen chairs. Dante scanned the page once and went still in that dangerous inward way of his. What does it mean? I asked. Matteo answered before he did. St. Gabriel West Service Gate, midnight exchange. The hotel, a meeting, a trap maybe, or evidence. My throat tightened. My father hid this. Your father hid many things, Dante said, but there was no accusation in it, only something like regret. The question is from whom? I laughed once, and it came out ugly. You keep talking like there are sides in this where he was still allowed to be innocent. His gaze fixed on me. There are. No, Dante. His name slipped out before I could stop it. Too intimate for anger. There really are. The room went very quiet. Matteo looked toward the window, deliberately. I pressed the heel of my hand to my eyes and hated myself for doing it in front of him. I spent years defending a dead man I apparently didn't know. You knew him, Dante said. You didn't. I knew the part of him that mattered. That hit somewhere I had left undefended. I lowered my hand. And what part was that? He looked at the notebook in his hand. Then at the wreckage of my apartment. Then back to me. He kept records when men around him preferred fire. The sentence landed with more weight than I understood. For a moment, none of us moved. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Bianca. I answered and put her on speaker because my hands were shaking. If Gianni tells you I approved pancetta in my recovery kitchen, she said by way of greeting, he is a liar and a coward. From somewhere in the background, Gianni shouted. This is slander from a woman who hates joy. Despite everything, breath broke from me like almost laughter. Bianca heard it and gentled at once. Adriana, I'm here. Good, because I need you coherent for one irritating detail. A man just came to the house asking after your father's things. Said Carlo once promised them to Salvatore storage. Renzo's driver recognized him and sent him away. Dante's head lifted sharply. Describe him, he said. Bianca did, mid-50s. Broken capillaries in the nose, limp, tattoo peeking at the collar. Matteo swore softly. Vittorio's accountant. Dante's face turned to stone. I looked from one man to the other. Who is Vittorio? Nobody answered quickly enough. That was answer enough. Tell me. Dante took the phone from me, spoke a quick order to Bianca, ended the call, and set the device down. Vittorio De Luca runs the parts of this city that still confuse cruelty for discipline, he said. He and I were raised close enough for people to compare us. They stopped when the bodies started. The bluntness of that should have chilled me. What chilled me more was the look in Matteo's eyes, not fear of Vittorio. Fear of what it meant that Vittorio wanted a dead pastry chef's notes. Why my father? I whispered. Dante's gaze held mine. Because Carlo Bellini saw something the wrong men needed buried. And you knew that? I suspected, so you used me to confirm it. He did not lie. Yes, the hurt arrived clean this time. I stepped back from him, one pace only, but it felt like tearing cloth. He saw it. Of course he did. For one breath his composure faltered. He took a step toward me, stopped himself, then looked down at the page in his hand as if restraint cost actual muscle. Adriana. Don't, I said. Not unless you mean to tell me everything. Silence. That was when I knew betrayal was no longer suspected. It had moved into the room and taken a chair. We left for St. Gabriel at 11:30 with no agreement and too much truth. I should not have gone. Any sane version of me would have stayed under guard with Bianca and let men raised in violence handle the violence they recognized. but sanity had been losing ground since the hotel curb. Besides, the instructions were hidden in my father's hand. If this was about him, I could not bear to sit in another room while strangers translated my dead into danger. Dante did not approve. He also did not stop me. That was worse. Rain polished the city black. The car moved through sleeping streets, while Matteo drove. Gianni sat in front pretending not to monitor 3 different radios. And I occupied the rear seat beside Dante, with enough space between us to qualify as a truce, and not enough to qualify as indifference. At a red light, Gianni muttered into his phone, "No, Bianca, I did not eat the cannoli. I merely protected it from loneliness." A pause. His wounded sigh filled the car. "Cruelty is your love language." Against my will, my mouth twitched. Dante saw, his gaze dropped to it, lifted, stayed. There were still words between us that had not healed, maybe would not. Yet in the dim car light, I felt the same impossible pull I had been fighting for days now. The awareness of his hands even when they were still, the pressure of silence around him. The way wanting something from him seemed to happen below the level of reason. We took the lower road under the rail viaduct toward the West Service entrance, and all at once Matteo swore. "Headlights, wrong direction, fast, down," Dante snapped. The first impact hit the side of the car with a scream of metal. Glass burst inward. Gianni ducked, cursing the saints and his cardiologist in the same breath. Matteo fought the wheel. Another vehicle slammed us again, harder, driving us toward the concrete support. Dante's arm came across my chest before the second shot shattered the rear window. The world narrowed to noise and force. Tires, gunfire, my own breath tearing. "Matteo, left." "I know left, boss," the car spun, then stopped dead against the barrier. Dante was already moving. Door open, gun out, body between mine and the shattered street before I understood we had stopped. He dragged me low behind the engine block, one hand at the nape of my neck, his voice all blade. "Stay where I put you." Bullets struck metal above us with obscene bright sparks. I had seen him calm before, in kitchens, in dining rooms, in the smooth machinery of fear he called business. This was something else. Efficient violence is more frightening up close because it has no waste in it. No shouting, no grand rage. Dante moved like a decision that had made peace with blood years ago. One of the attackers broke from the far side of the other car, and Dante put him down before my mind caught up to the shape. Not anger, practice. I swallowed hard against the taste of iron and rain. Another man came around from the passenger side, weapon raised toward where I crouched. I did not think. I grabbed the broken emergency flare from the roadside kit at my feet and hurled it at his face. He flinched. That half-second was enough. Matteo shot him through the shoulder and tackled him into the wet concrete. Gianni, astonishingly flat on his stomach behind a tire, shouted, "I would like to note that I hate cardio and ambushes equally." A third gunman came from under the rail shadow. Dante reached him first. He did not shoot. He struck. Fast, brutal, exact. The man went down choking, knife skidding across wet pavement to stop by my knee. I stared at the blade. At Dante's hand closing around the front of the attacker's coat. "Who sent you?" Dante asked. The man laughed through blood. "You know who." Dante hit him once, not wild. Precise enough to separate truth from swagger. "Say it." "De Luca," the man gasped. "And your own house opened the gate." A cold silence followed that words couldn't quite hold. "Your own house." Traitor, Dante looked at Matteo. "Alive." Then the shooter spit blood near Dante's shoe and smiled. He said the girl matters now. Everything in Dante's face went still. He stood, came back to me. Knelt in the rain. "Are you hit?" I shook my head. My whole body had begun to shiver with delayed fear. His hand cupped the back of my skull once, checking for glass, injury, God knew what else. His thumb brushed the line just below my ear. That should not have felt intimate beside blood on the pavement. It did. "Look at me, stray." I did. "You're safe." The lie was enormous. And yet when he said it, some frightened part of me believed him. Dante he had known from the curb, not love. He did not use words that made men weak in the mouth. But from the moment she lunged back toward that hotel door for people she would never meet, rain in her lashes, split lip. No calculation in it at all. He had known she was dangerous to him in a way bullets were not. She ran toward harm if someone else might bleed. No one in his world did that cleanly. No one had since Lucia, and now DeLuca knew it too. That was intolerable. They took us to a safe apartment over one of Dante's quieter restaurants near the river. Bianca arrived within 20 minutes with a medical bag and the face of a woman who had run out of patience several administrations ago. Gianni limped in behind her, clutching his side dramatically. "If I die, tell everyone I died heroic and thin." Bianca looked him over. "You're bruised and annoying, sadly survivable. Your tenderness nourishes me." She shoved gauze into his hand. While Matteo coordinated men downstairs, Bianca cleaned the cut on my shoulder I had not even noticed, until she peeled wet fabric away and Dante's entire posture changed. The glass had sliced me shallowly near the collarbone. "It's nothing," I said. Dante said, "No." Bianca stitched in efficient silence. When she finished, she looked between us and announced, "Wonderful, you're both impossible." Gianni stopped leaning. One by one, everyone found reasons to leave. The room quieted. Rain moved at the windows. I stood near the sink in one of Dante's white shirts, sleeves rolled, my pulse still remembering the underpass. He stood across the room with his own blood drying dark at one knuckle. "You killed him?" I asked. "The one who tried to knife you? No. Would you have?" He looked at me for a long time. Yes, I should have recoiled. Instead, tears rose so suddenly they humiliated me. "Adriana, I'm not crying because I'm shocked," I said, angry at my own voice. "I'm crying because I'm not." He came closer, stopped just short of touching me. Restraint again pulled so tight it felt audible. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what? For being a man you have to get used to." That undid something in me. I laughed once through the tears. "That is a terrible apology. It's the only true one." My hands shook. I hated it. Hated that he saw. "I should go," I whispered. His gaze dropped to my mouth and came back up. "No," not command, plea buried alive, I swallowed. "That isn't fair. Nothing about you has been fair," my breath caught. He lifted one hand slowly, giving me time to move. I didn't. His fingers touched the side of my face, barely there, like he was testing whether tenderness would burn him. My whole body went still around the contact. This was the moment all the almosts had been building toward. I knew it because fear and relief arrived together, because I wanted to lean in and could not bear that I wanted to. Because he was waiting, not for permission alone, but for something in me to become honest enough to survive. "I don't know what this is," I said, and the confession cost me. "I only know when you were out there I couldn't breathe right." His eyes closed once briefly. A wound or prayer, I couldn't tell. "That's enough," he said. When he kissed me, it was slow and unbearably careful. Not possession. Not hunger, though hunger lived in every pause. His mouth touched mine as if he had no right to and could not stop anyway. I made a small sound I had never heard from myself before. Then he pulled back, forehead to mine, breathing hard, stopped, again, because I mattered to him more than the thing he wanted. "Dante," a phone rang in the next room. War had arrived. The first time I saw a body because of him, it was Matteo's blood on marble. Not dead, worse in a way. Alive enough to look at me while red spread fast beneath his shoulder, alive enough to grind out, "Don't panic," as if panic were the inappropriate part of the morning. It happened 2 days after the ambush. Dante had moved me back to the lake house with enough security to protect a head of state, and none of the illusion that any of it could hold forever. The city had gone taut around us. Warehouses burned on the south side. A DeLuca truck turned up in the river with no driver and 3 warnings nailed inside it. Men came and went from Dante's study speaking in clipped Italian, while I learned the sounds of magazines being loaded in adjacent rooms. War did not announce itself with drums. It announced itself with routine that grew teeth. Matteo took the bullet meant for me in the conservatory. I had gone there at dawn because the house smelled of gun oil and stale coffee and fear. and the glass room at the back still held citrus trees. Bianca bullied through winter. I was cutting white camellias for the kitchen when the side door opened. I smiled before I saw the gun. A catering assistant from the hotel, or the same uniform anyway, hairnet, delivery shoes. Eyes dead flat. The first shot cracked the pot behind me, soil exploded over my legs. Mateo hit me from the side so hard my cheek struck tile. The second shot went through him. He grunted once, more irritation than pain, and still managed to draw and return fire from the floor. Men flooded the room after that, shouting, glass shattering. The smell of wet earth and cordite mixing, until I thought I might never separate them again. By the time Dante reached us, the shooter was dead and Mateo was sitting against the wall, gray with pain, pressing his own wound while swearing at everyone's technique. I said I'm fine, he bit out. Bianca, dropping to her knees with her med kit, replied, "That's because stupidity affects circulation." He actually almost smiled. I knelt beside him, hands bloodied from trying to hold pressure where he told me to. "Sorry," I whispered, uselessly. Mateo looked at me with those hard, watchful eyes that had distrusted me longest. "For what? You got shot. For standing where I stand," his mouth tightened. "That part wasn't your fault. It was the closest thing to kindness he had ever offered me. It made my throat burn." Dante stood over us with murder in his stillness. "What door?" he asked. Mateo jerked his chin toward the side entrance. "Kitchen route. Someone gave schedule and access. Traitor, again." Dante's gaze moved to the dead false caterer, then to the camellias scattered on the floor, then to my bloody hands. For one moment, he looked like a man standing at the lip of a well too familiar to mistake. That afternoon, while Mateo underwent surgery at a private clinic Dante owned, but pretended not to, Bianca packed me a bag. I watched from the edge of the bed. "What are you doing?" "Creating an option." "For whom?" "For you." She folded jeans with military efficiency. "There's a car leaving at 6, Canada by morning. New papers within 48 hours if Dante stops arguing with me." I stared at her. "You think I should go? I think you should choose with full vision." She looked up. "This world is not romantic because he is handsome in a dark coat. It eats people by function. Drivers, guards, accountants, women who happen to stand in the wrong hall. If you stay, stay because you saw the teeth and counted them." I sat very still. Outside, I heard Gianni in the corridor praying theatrically over a Tupperware container. "Dear Lord, if Bianca has made kale again, take me now with dignity." Bianca closed her eyes once in exhausted contempt. "You see. Even comic relief suffers here." I laughed despite the rawness lodged under my ribs, then the laugh disappeared. Canada, a clean word, a possible life. At 5:30 I stood in the foyer with my bag in my hand. Dante came down the stairs alone. No jacket, no tie, a line of fatigue I had never seen on him before. He looked from the bag to my face and did not touch either. "The car is ready," he said. That was all. No demand to stay, no persuasion, no claim. I hated him a little for making the choice mine. "Mateo," I asked, "stable. And the traitor?" "Not yet," I nodded once. My pulse sounded strange. This was the exit point, not dramatic, not barred by guns or tears, a door, a car. A future that would cost me one identity and perhaps save another. If I left, I could still tell myself this had happened around me, not through me. I could preserve some version of Adriana Bellini that baked wedding cakes and grieved ordinary things. If I stayed, I would be choosing with open eyes. Him, his world, its consequences. Dante waited like a man at sentencing. "What happens if I go?" I asked. "Your name disappears. And if I stay?" His eyes held mine, no flinching, no rescue from truth. "It changes." I looked down at my hands. The cuticle of my thumb still held Mateo's blood in a thin, dark crescent. I thought of my father's notes. Of men breaking into my apartment for pages written in sugar shorthand. Of being pushed into rain and still running back because strangers might swallow poison. The problem was not that Dante had dragged me too far into darkness. The problem was that once I had seen what it was doing, I could no longer pretend leaving made me clean. I set the bag down. Dante did not move. I'm not staying because I'm trapped, I said. I know. I'm staying because my father died inside this, and if there is truth left, I want it. Something broke quietly across his face. Not relief, something harsher. You don't owe me that. This isn't for you. My voice shook, but not from uncertainty now. And if you ever use me again without telling me, I will make your miserable diet martyr an ally, and we will ruin your house together. A ghost of a laugh touched him and was gone. From the corridor, Gianni called, "For the record, I can be bought with focaccia." Bianca said, "You already were." Dante came one step closer. "If you stray, you follow instructions when I give them. Reasonable ones. All of mine are reasonable. That is objectively false." His gaze dipped to my mouth. Almost always. Then Matteo's surgeon called with an update, and the moment sealed itself shut. At midnight, I went to the kitchen and made funeral flowers from sugar, white camellias, hollow at the center. Sharp enough to shatter. I didn't say they were for Matteo. No one made me. Matteo came home with his arm in a sling and even less patience than usual. That was how I knew I loved him a little. Not romantically, not even gently, but in the bruised family way people earn by bleeding near you and then insulting the soup. "Your broth is oversalted," he told me the first evening back. "You were shot. I still have a tongue." "Tragic for all of us," Gianni muttered, sneaking a heel of bread behind Bianca's back. Bianca didn't turn from the stove. I heard that carbohydrate criminal. Their bickering threaded through the house like borrowed normalcy. We all held it too tightly. Because underneath it, things were unraveling. 2 shipments vanished. A warehouse manager turned up missing. Uncle Renzo visited twice, and each time Dante grew quieter afterward, not louder. That frightened me more. Men who shouted often wanted witnesses. Men like Dante wanted precision. I found the next clue in my father's notebook by accident, not in the words, in the stains. He had marked certain pages with sugar syrup cooked to different temperatures. Thread, soft ball, hard crack, tiny amber ghosts at the corners. Once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. It corresponded to years, specific years, the last ones before he died. When I mapped the marked pages against delivery dates hidden in the margins, one location repeated. St. Agnes Chapel, the closed church on Halstead where my parents had married before money ran out, and everything else did too. I should have told Dante immediately. Instead, I made a mistake. A real one. I wanted one thing that was still mine. One discovery not first filtered through his men, his orders, his impossible certainty. So I took Gianni's spare car key from the hook by the mudroom, left before dawn, and drove to St. Agnes alone. Halfway there, I knew I had done something stupid, not because the streets were empty. Because they weren't. The same gray sedan stayed 2 turns behind me through Bridgeport. I told myself it could be coincidence until it mirrored my third, unnecessary turn. By then the church was in sight. I parked badly, heart-pounding, and ran. St. Agnes stood boarded and soot-streaked, the side chapel door hanging crooked from old damage. Inside smelled of wet plaster, dust, and extinguished candles. I found the box within minutes, under the third kneeler from the left. Exactly where my father used to hide emergency rent cash when I was small, and my mother still believed in God enough to argue with him weekly. The box held ledger copies, names, payments, initials I recognized now from the recipe margins, and one photograph, young Dante, younger than I had ever seen him. Beside him, a girl with bright laughing eyes and a silver lighter in her hand. Lucia, I thought. The back door shut behind me. I turned with the box in my arms. Uncle Renzo stood in the aisle. He was not alone. 2 men fanned out behind him, and the gray sedan driver entered last, closing the chapel door with careful respect as if manners still applied. Renzo's smile had gone thin. "You were always going to come where your father pointed." My mouth dried. "You followed me. You made it simple." He looked almost sad. "You should have taken the car to Canada." The shock was not that he had betrayed us. Somewhere deep down, I think I had already begun to know. The shock was that he could stand in a church my parents once loved and wear betrayal like a tailored coat. "My father hid those records from you," I said. "He hid them from everyone." Carlo was sentimental. He mistook evidence for salvation. I clutched the box tighter. "You framed him," Renzo sighed. "Number Vittorio wanted him gone." I merely chose not to prevent what was useful. The chapel tilted around me. "You let him die. Your father made himself inconvenient, so did Lucia." The name came out casually. That was the unforgivable part. I stared. "What?" Renzo's eyes sharpened. "You don't know, of course Dante never told you. The pantry door at Club Sierra, the fire." Vittorio set the blaze, but it was my order that kept the door locked. Lucia had seen the books. Carlo had copied them. One dead girl, one dead baker, and all our problems should have ended. My knees threatened to fail. Lucia, the locked room, Dante's silence in the elevator. The scarred, controlled hatred he wore instead of grief. And suddenly, I understood things the listener had likely known before I did. Why my father mattered, why my name landed like a wound. Why Dante's lighter clicked in enclosed spaces like a prayer he hated needing. The worst part was that Renzo saw comprehension arrive and smiled at it. "You understand now," he said softly. "Blood preserves itself." "No," I whispered. "Monsters say that when they want family to sound holy." His face hardened for the first time. "Take the box." One of the men stepped forward. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the candle stand. It clanged across the stone, buying me 2 seconds. I ran for the side vestry, slammed the inner latch, and jammed a broken pew brace through the handles as they hit the door from outside. My phone. My stupid, blessed phone. No signal. Then one bar. "Gone back." I sent one text on instinct. "Rienzo, SDAGNES." The door shuddered. Wood cracked. I looked around wildly. Dust. Old altar linens, a rusted thurible, a brass incense lighter on a chain. Not his silver lighter. Still metal, still flame. I could smell leaking gas from a damaged wall heater near the sacristy. Renzo's men hit the door again. The first splinter snapped loose. I stood with the chain wrapped in my fist, the gas stink rising, my pulse loud enough to drown prayer. And somewhere out in the city, I had to believe Dante had seen my message. The door gave out. The door burst inward on the third strike. I swung the brass incense lighter without elegance and caught the first man across the temple. He stumbled into the wall, cursing. The second grabbed my wrist. We crashed into a rack of mildewed vestments and went down in a choking bloom of dust and old incense. I bit him, hard. He shouted, more shocked than hurt, and I drove my knee up with every ungraceful inch of panic I had. It worked enough to free my hand. I scrambled backward toward the leaking wall heater, chain still wrapped around my fist. The gas smell thickened. Renzo stepped into the ruined sacristy as if entering a negotiation. "Enough, Adriana." I was shaking too badly to hide it, so I didn't try. "You let a girl burn." His face remained almost kind. "I let the future survive." "No." I backed toward the far wall, eyes flicking between the broken heater line and the men closing in. "You let yourself survive." That landed, barely. Enough to sharpen him. He nodded once to the unhurt man. "Take the box." I lifted the brass lighter chain. The man laughed. I struck it against the stone. Spark. Small, mean, real. Everyone in the room smelled the gas fully then. The laughter died. "Try it," I said, voice raw. "Come closer." Maybe they believed me. Maybe they believed that a pastry chef who had smelled poison in cream and run back into danger might actually choose to blow a chapel wall apart before handing over what her father died for. The truth was uglier. I did not know what I would do until I did it. Renzo studied me with something like reluctant admiration. "This is why he kept you close." The words hit me oddly. He thought Dante's obsession was strategy. He didn't understand the first thing about either of us. Sirens wailed somewhere far off, or maybe just tires on wet road. Hard to tell over the blood in my ears. Then gunfire cracked from the nave. Fast, close. A body hit wood outside the sacristy door. Renzo turned. The next seconds came apart in violent pieces. Matteo entered first, pale and one-armed and terrifying anyway, taking down the second man with 2 shots so controlled they sounded almost bored. Gianni came behind him, wild-eyed and furious, shouting, "This is why nobody lets me skip cardio," while dragging me low behind a toppled cabinet. And then Dante walked through the gun's smoke. There are moments when fear becomes so large it passes through terror and emerges as clarity. Seeing him then did that to me. Black coat open. Blood already at one cuff, face stripped of everything except intent. He was not handsome in that instant. He was final. Renzo looked at his nephew and understood at last that this would not be a conversation. "Dante," he began. "No," one word, flat enough to freeze a room. Vittorio De Luca stepped from the side aisle then, because of course he had been there, because men like him preferred to watch family rot before touching the knife themselves. He was broader than Dante, a little older, with charm worn like a counterfeit saint medal. His smile was easy. That was the first disturbing thing. The second was how much of Dante I could see in him, not in the face, but in the stillness, in the absence of waste. He was what Dante might have become if grief had not left one piece of him capable of reverence. "Still sentimental," Vittorio said. "Always your weakness." Dante's gun did not waver. Lucia was not a weakness. "No," Vittorio agreed. "She was leverage." I made a sound then, not a word, something smaller and ruined. Vittorio glanced at me. "And now the baker's daughter is too." Dante moved before I finished breathing. Gunfire thundered through plaster and saints. Matteo hauled Renzo sideways. Gianni shoved me behind the old confessional with surprising strength while muttering, "If I survive this, I am eating 6 cannoli and marrying the nurse." The fight was not elegant. Nothing real ever is. Stone dust, splintered pews, Matteo grim with pain and accuracy, Gianni somehow shooting and complaining simultaneously. Vittorio using pillars for cover like a man trained by the same ghosts as Dante. At one point, Renzo lunged for the box where it had skidded under a bench. I got there first. I don't know if that was courage or rage. I only know I kicked the bench into his knees and ran the ledger box straight to Dante. He saw me coming and horror hit his face for the first time. Down, too late. Vittorio had a line on me. The shot went wide because Matteo, wounded arm and all, threw himself into the angle and took the graze across his ribs instead. He hit the floor hard. "Matteo," I screamed. Dante shot twice. One for the pillar beside Vittorio's head, forcing him back. One for the hand reaching toward me. The church rang with it. Then Dante was at my side, dragging me behind the stone font, hands hard on my face, searching. "Are you hit? No, do not move from here. You're bleeding." He looked at me like blood was weather. Then his gaze dropped to the ledger box in my lap. "You kept it." It was an absurd thing to say in a church full of guns, smoke, and betrayal. I clutched the box harder. It was my father's. Something in him broke open, silent and vast. He touched my cheek with his thumb once. Soot on skin, a benediction from a man made for endings. "Stray," he said, and the word was no longer cold at all. "Stay with Gianni." He rose and went back into the smoke. The final view of Vittorio came through shattered votive glass. Smiling, retreating through the side aisle even while wounded, promising with his eyes that this was not the last room. He escaped that chapel. Renzo did not. Matteo, white-lipped and breathing hard, had him pinned at gunpoint while Dante stood over the uncle who had raised him and ruined him. I could not hear every word, only pieces. "Lucia, necessary, Carlo Capid," then Dante's voice, low enough that everyone else went still to hear it. "You locked the door." Renzo said nothing worth remembering. The gunshot that followed was not loud in the way I expected. Some griefs make less noise when they finally finish. Afterward, in the shattered chapel smelling of gas and old smoke, Dante came back to me with blood on his hands and his soul in pieces small enough to breathe through. And I went to him anyway. It took 48 hours to finish Vittorio De Luca. 48 hours of raids, intercepted calls, switched routes, and men sleeping in chairs with guns in reach and coffee gone sour beside them. 48 hours of Matteo, refusing the hospital and Bianca threatening, to tranquilize him personally. 48 hours of Dante speaking less than ever, which meant the entire city seemed to lower its voice in answer. Renzo's death changed everything, not publicly. Publicly, old men of standing suffered neat heart failures and families requested privacy. But inside Dante's world, blood had turned on blood and survived. That made every alliance tremble. The ledger copies from the chapel were enough to burn half of Vittorio's safe channels to the ground. My father had hidden shipment routes, payoff names, arson dates, and the details of the Club Sierra fire in the margins of wedding cakes and feast day pastries. He had not been part of the machine. He had been documenting it from inside, hoping, God knew for how long, that evidence might outlive him. The final meeting point was Club Sierra itself, or what remained of it. The city had condemned the shell years ago after the fire. Broken windows, soot-eaten beams. A boarded dance hall where Dante's sister had died because a locked pantry door had mattered less to some men than profit. Absolutely not, Bianca said when she realized where Dante was going. Correct, Gianni added, on behalf of cholesterol, morale, and all non-suicidal objectives. Dante ignored both of them. I did not. I'm going. 4 heads turned. Dante's expression did not change. No, yes, it is an active kill zone, and the ledger is in my father's code. I held his gaze. If he moved anything from the original sites, I can read the pattern faster than your men. Matteo, pale under the bruising but upright, said. He's right about the kill zone. I'm right about the code. Silence. The debate ended the way most of ours did lately, with truth cornering force until force had to learn manners. Dante brought me. Night swallowed the old club hole. We entered through the service corridor, where the walls were still smoke-stained under fresh dust. The air held that dead, cold smell buildings get when they have suffered too much weather to remember the living. My chest tightened immediately, not because of ghosts I knew, because of his. I heard it in the dark before I saw him. Click, the silver lighter. He did not light it, just opened and shut it once as we moved, a private rhythm against the ruin. Room by room, Matteo's men cleared the ground floor. Vittorio had left decoys, false ledgers, empty weapons crates, one wired office that would have taken out the north wall if Matteo hadn't recognized the trigger arrangement. Gianni found it and announced shakily, I'm charging extra for spiritual damages. On the second floor, in what had once been the pastry prep room for banquets, I saw the pattern. Vittorio had copied my father's method badly. Too literal. He used sugar temperatures to mark times but not ingredients to mark names. Carlo always layered meaning. Vittorio only imitated surfaces. Pantry, I said. Dante went still beside me. I turned to the old inventory slate on the wall. Hard crack beside saint, burnt syrup beside silver. Not this room, I said, pulse climbing. The original one. No one needed clarification. The pantry door at Club Sierra still stood at the end of the hall, reinforced, replaced after the fire, locked again as if history had no imagination. Dante stared at it. For one terrible moment, I thought he might become stone and stay there. Then he handed Matteo his lighter, not because he trusted Matteo with it. Because he could not hold it and open that door at the same time. Matteo understood. So did I. Dante took the key from the ring one of Renzo's men had carried, opened the pantry himself. Inside waited Vittorio. Of course, not alone, 2 shooters, one on each side of the shelving, but Vittorio in the center, calm as a host. You always come back for the dead, he said. What followed happened too quickly for clean memory and too vividly to ever forget. One shooter fired from the left. I dropped by instinct, dragging the ledger case with me. Matteo returned fire and took the man through the throat. Gianni, from the hall, shouted something about hazard pay and somehow hit the second gunman in the thigh. Vittorio went for Dante at close range. Not with a gun, with a knife. That was the mirror in him. He wanted intimacy with violence, proof of superiority measured in inches, not yards. Dante met him like a man who had been walking toward this room for half his life. They crashed into shelving. Metal screamed. Cans rained down. Old ash shook from the ceiling. Vittorio was stronger than I expected, Dante faster than I could follow, and both of them frightening in how little they spoke while trying to end each other. Then Vittorio broke away and lunged toward me, not because I was weakest, because he knew exactly where to cut Dante deepest. I snatched the nearest thing, an industrial sugar torch, rusted but fueled from recent tampering, and hit the ignition. Flame burst blue-white between us. Vittorio checked, startled for the first time. "My father taught me more than recipes," I said, though my hand shook violently. It bought half a second. Dante used it. He drove Vittorio back against the pantry wall with a force that rattled every shelf in the room. The knife skidded away. Vittorio laughed blood into Dante's collar and said something I will hear until I die. "She would have died too." "Lucia." He meant Lucia. Dante's face emptied. "No," he said, and ended him. The silence after was not relief. It was aftermath. The kind that arrives wearing the shape of justice and tastes like ash anyway. Dante stood over the body a long moment, chest heaving once, then not at all. When he turned to me, I saw what victory had cost him. Not innocence. He had lost that long before I knew him. Something harder. The final lie that family and enemy could still be separated by blood. I stepped around the body, around the fire-black wall, around all the history trying to swallow the room. And put my hand on his face. He leaned into it for one breath, just one. Behind us, Matteo looked away. Gianni crossed himself and whispered, "I am absolutely eating pasta after this." Outside, sirens finally approached the dead club too late to matter. Dante took his lighter back from Matteo in the hallway. He struck flame once, watched it steady, then closed the lid. It is over. War ended the way storms do in cities, not all at once and never cleanly. The newspapers called it an organized crime correction, which felt obscene and bureaucratic at the same time. Restaurants changed suppliers. 2 councilmen found new convictions. 3 De Luca properties transferred quietly through shell owners who suddenly remembered outstanding debts to salvator interests. Men stopped checking the rearview mirror quite so often when driving north of the river. At the lake house, normal returned in fragments. Matteo regained enough strength to insult furniture, while pretending not to be grateful for Bianca's strict medication schedule. Gianni finally got one real date with Bianca after she caught him eating contraband tiramisu in the clinic parking lot and declared anyone that committed to foolishness deserved supervision. "She said yes because I'm layered," he told me in the kitchen, straightening his collar in the reflection of a darkened oven door. "She said yes because she pitied your pulse," I replied, piping cream into Zeppeli. He clutched his chest. "Cruel, you've grown cruel since joining the family." The word should have startled me. Instead, it settled somewhere I was still learning to name. I moved between 2 homes now. My apartment, repaired but permanently altered by memory, and the house on the lake where my mug had somehow appeared beside Bianca's tea tins without discussion. Bellini Patisserie had reopened under my management after the old owner accepted a generous buyout and a suggestion from Dante he wisely interpreted as destiny. I renamed the back room Carlo's Table. Quietly, for me, my first signature dessert after reopening was called hard crack, dark chocolate base, burnt orange cream. A sugar shell thin enough to shatter under pressure with sea salt hidden beneath. I did not call it a metaphor. Gianni did that for me. He ate one in Dante's study, made a scandalized noise, and said, "Boss, she's basically serving feelings in formal wear." Dante, reviewing contracts at his desk, looked up just long enough to ask, "Whose?" Gianni blinked. "All of ours, probably." Later, I found Dante alone in the closed bakery after midnight, standing by the display case with one untouched hard crack on a plate and that silver lighter in his hand. "You smile at sugar like it insulted you," I said from the doorway. He looked over. "It reminds me of you. That doesn't sound flattering. It wasn't meant to be." I came closer. The bakery smelled of vanilla, bleach, and cooling metal. Outside, November had finally surrendered to clean winter. Inside, the heat pressed gently at the windows. "You've been avoiding a conversation," I said. "Yes. Should I be worried?" He considered. Probably. That should have scared me more than it did. I stopped on the other side of the counter. We did this still, sometimes, talked across surfaces because direct closeness said too much too fast. My father, I asked. What you know, everything. Dante set the lighter down. Then, finally, he told me. How Carlo Bellini had catered Club Sierra for years because pastry paid better than pride. How he had seen ledger exchanges. He should not have seen and begun copying patterns when Renzo and Vittorio started using the club to move more than money. How Lucia, 16 and reckless with conscience, had found Carlo's notes and sworn to help him get them out. How the fire the night she died was meant to erase both records and witness. How Carlo survived the blaze long enough to hide what he could and long enough to be blamed when the rest vanished. He tried to get her out, I asked, already crying. Dante's jaw worked once. Yes, and failed. Yes, I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, he was still where he had been, still refusing to soften the truth. I hated your father for years, he said. Because hating the dead man who lived was easier than hating the blood that raised me. The honesty in it hurt. That was why it mattered. I came around the counter. He looked at me like I was the one doing something dangerous. You don't have to forgive yourself in one night, I said quietly. His mouth roughened at the edges. That wasn't the plan. No, he reached into his coat pocket and took out a small black box. I stared at it, then at him. Dante, I know. His voice was almost grim. There is no correct version of this. He opened the box. Inside lay a ring that looked old and deliberate rather than delicate. Oval diamond, thin gold band. A piece chosen by a man who understood permanence better than romance and had still tried for beauty. This was my mother S, he said. She wore it until the day she decided family loyalty was a religion and truth was optional. I kept it because I wasn't sure whether inheritance had to mean obedience. His eyes held mine. I know what I am. I know what my name asks of anyone near it. I cannot offer safe. I cannot offer ordinary, but I can offer you the truth first and myself after it. My heartbeat became clumsy. I don't want a fairy tale, I whispered. Good, I don't have one. For one absurd second, I laughed through tears. Then he came around the counter and knelt. Not elegantly, not theatrically, but like a man submitting to the gravity of what he was asking. Adriana Bellini, he said, every syllable steady, build the life after war with me. No grand speech. No forever sharpened into sentiment, just that, the room blurred. I touched his face because if I touched the ring first I might break apart entirely. Yes, I said. Then because honesty had become our only luxury, yes, even though I'm still angry sometimes. A real smile touched his mouth at last, brief, devastating. Good. So am I. When he slid the ring on my finger, his hand shook once. Only once. Later, after Gianni yelled so loudly Bianca accused him of proposing by proxy. After Matteo nodded from the doorway like approval, was a military resource he had decided to spend. After the house finally quieted, Dante and I stood barefoot in the kitchen sharing cold pastry over the sink. He brushed sugar from my lower lip with his thumb. Stray, he said. It's warm now, entirely warm, and for the first time the word felt like home. 9 months later, the ordinary parts still startled me most, not because they were perfect, because they existed. The bakery opened at 6. The lake house coffee machine still hissed like an offended ant. Matteo had developed the habit of appearing in Carlo's table every Thursday at noon, claiming he merely happened to be near excellent espresso. Gianni and Bianca were not officially together, which was apparently why he now owned 3 shirts she had purchased for him, so the public suffers less. Chicago remained Chicago. Dangerous in corners, beautiful in weather, full of men who would have preferred Dante Salvator smaller and alive because dead men create paperwork. His world did not become safe because I loved him. That was never the point. The point was that I had chosen with my eyes open, and he kept choosing back. On the morning of St. Cecilia's parish fundraiser, my kitchen smelled of lemon rind, toasted almond, and spun sugar. We were donating desserts for the school roof repair. Children kept darting through the prep room despite signs, because signs are only theoretical to the under 10. Dante arrived at noon in a dark coat carrying winter air and that peculiar stillness rooms made for him. Conversations lowered, a little, not from fear exactly anymore, from awareness. He stood by the stainless prep table while I finished glazing a croquembouche tower for the silent auction. "You're early," I said. "You said 12. It is 12:02. I was delayed by incompetence. Who's everyone s?" I smiled without looking up. He watched my hands for a while. He did that often when he thought I didn't notice, as if work revealed me in ways talking never fully could. A crash sounded behind me. One of the school volunteers had dropped a tray of petty fours. Not a disaster. Worse, a little boy named Nico, 6 years old and powered entirely by bad timing, had gone running toward the spill just as the sugar cage from the croquembouche started slipping from its top tier. Sharp spun sugar can cut like thin glass. I moved before anyone else did. Wait, too late for the warning, not too late for me. I lunged, catching the falling sugar frame with both bare hands before it shattered over Nico's face. Hot edges bit my palms. The tower wobbled but held. Nico stared up at me with round, horrified eyes and one frosting smear across his cheek. "You okay?" I asked, crouching immediately to his level instead of looking at the blood gathering in my hand. He nodded, lip trembling. "Good, then your job is to get Bianca because she likes bossing people and I think this is her moment." He ran. Only when he was clear did the sting register fully. The room had gone silent, not the soft bakery silence of concentration, the dangerous kind. The kind that remembered who Dante was before remembering where it stood. He was beside me in a second. His hand closed around my wrist carefully, turning my palm upward. Fine cuts, nothing deep, enough blood to make men around us reconsider mortality. "You did it again," he said. I looked up. His face had that stripped, private look I had seen only a few times, the one that belonged to the deepest rooms in him. "What? Chose the child before yourself." The bakery blurred a little around the edges. Chapter 1 opened silently between us then. Rain, curb, poison, my stupid, relentless body running back toward danger because someone else might pay first. He had named it in Chapter 6 only to the dark. Now he gave it to me. "That's why," he said, voice low enough for only me. "From the first night, you weren't afraid for yourself, you never are first." "It costs me every time." I laughed softly through the sting. "That doesn't sound romantic." "It is." His thumb hovered above the cut in my palm, not touching yet. "It's worship and anger in equal measure." Bianca arrived with bandages and 3 levels of annoyance. "Wonderful. The 2 of you found a fresh way to terrify me before lunch." Gianni, carrying boxes in from the van, took one look at my hands and declared, "I leave for 4 minutes and our patron saint of poor impulse control starts catching architecture." Nico peeked from behind him and whispered, "I said thank you." I smiled at the boy. Then we're even. Later, after the fundraiser, after the children had gone home sugared into obedience, and Matteo had pretended not to donate an offensive amount of money to the roof fund, Dante found me alone in the darkened bakery. The city had gone blue outside the windows. I was wrapping the last unsold pastries when I heard it. Click, his lighter. I turned. He stood by the doorway, silver flame blooming steadily in his hand, not for a cigarette, never that, but for the single candle he had set in the center of a leftover lemon tart. "For what?" I asked. "For your father," he said, "and Lucia and roofs that stay over children." My throat tightened. He set the lit candle between us. Same sound, same metal, same gesture as the night this began. Then it meant warning, control, the measured patience of a dangerous man approaching a ruined girl in the rain. Now it meant remembrance. Home, maybe, the version people like us were allowed. I stepped into him carefully, because some tendernesses still deserved reverence. He folded me in without hurry, one hand spanning the back of my bandaged palms as if even now he could shield what made me myself. "Stray," he murmured into my hair, no possession left in it. Only love earned the hard way. I thought then, not for the first time, about cost, about Lucia, about Carlo, about Matteo's scar and Bianca's patience and Gianni's impossible jokes. About the fact that choosing Dante had not washed blood from the story. It had only made me responsible for knowing what I was holding. Maybe that was the unresolved thread love leaves in every honest life. Not whether it is worth it, but whether you can live cleanly after learning there is no clean way to keep what saves you. I lifted my face and kissed him once, slow and certain. Outside, Chicago went on being difficult and alive. Inside, the candle was held. Would you have chosen Dante and let the cost become yours too?